Hi, I'm Jan Kapanides with Stratos Consulting, and today I'll be walking through the custom expense planning module that we've created for our clients using Oracle EPM Cloud. To kick things off today, I'm just going to walk through a quick agenda for this video. So first, I'm going to start with an overview of what this expense planning module actually does and some of the key differences between Oracle's out-of-the-box capabilities for these purposes versus our custom-built ones. Then we'll get into some of the architecture and dimensionality that's involved in this application. And then we'll move on to show how actuals are configured in this application, along with what drill through is and how that works. And then we'll wrap up with looking at some of the input forms, along with showing some of the reporting capabilities that are possible in this application. So I'm going to jump over to the application now, but before I get into the specifics of what this application actually does, I just want to talk briefly about what this custom built module can actually do. So in general, expense planning can be pretty granular, time consuming, and error prone. The existing out-of-the-box Oracle functionality requires several clicks to access on a form and doesn't really allow users to use a lot of typical Excel functionality to enter their forecast data. This leads to a much less intuitive and more time-consuming process when you're trying to close a forecast in a timely manner. Our supporting detail solution or expense planning solution is entirely Excel or SmartView based, offering a much more flexible and scalable solution while offering more advanced and efficient reporting capabilities. This module will allow you to conduct your expense planning responsibilities at a more granular and detailed level while also visualizing your actual expenses in the same view. So now just to talk about some of the cubes that are going to be involved in this module, just want to focus your attention here on these bottom two. We have SDINP and SDRPT. The SD just stands for supporting detail, which is just another way of rephrasing your expense planning. Supporting detail is just a more granular version of expense planning. So SDINP is your supporting detail input cube. This is going to be a custom BSO cube where all your planning and forecasting inputs will be conducted. SDRPT is going to be your reporting cube. So your supporting detail reporting cube. This is an ASO cube, which will pretty much serve as the basis for all reporting needs. Anything input in the INP cube will automatically be pushed to the RPT cube anytime you submit data on a form. So now just to talk about some of the dimensionality that you'll see in this application. I really want to just focus on this supporting detail dimension. This is a custom dimension that's going to be used to facilitate these expense planning processes. If you notice here, we have a member up at the top called Actuals. This member is where all your actual data is going to be loaded to. So anything coming from a source system that's loaded into this application will be loaded to this Actuals member. So whether that be from an ERP, a flat file, in this case, this application is using a direct connection to an ERP, and I'll show you how that's kind of reflected on the input forms when I talk about drill through. But regardless, all actuals will be loaded to that line item. This is just a way for us to differentiate your actual data from your forecasted data, which is going to be planned at all of these LI members or line item members. These line item members in supporting detail will allow you to break down an intersection into smaller pieces to get more and more granular as the business requires. And again, you'll see what these look like when I demonstrate how they're used on an input form. The next thing I want to call out is the period dimension. So you might typically be used to the period dimension only being used for the breakdown of time, so like your months. So for example, you have your standard dimensionality here, your months of the year, but we've also added this node here called supporting detail descriptions. This is going to be the home for the smart lists that are used on the form. Think of smart lists as just a dropdown, but you'll see how that's used when I open up the input form. We also have these supporting detail descriptors. So these members here, like description, vendor, purchase order, these are going to be free-form text fields that will allow you to add additional detail for each intersection. Now, just moving into Smart View, I will just start talking about the different pieces of this input form and how they all kind of play together. First thing I want to talk about is your actuals. So in column A here, we have our supporting detail dimension. I first want to focus on these lines here. This lines 3 through 7 are representative of actual data. So all your actual data will be loaded to the closed months of the year, and they're going to be marked with a black border like so. This black border represents that this cell is drill through enabled. What that means is that by implementing drill through, this will allow users quick access to data in the source system without actually leaving the Excel interface. So you see this number here, about 14,000. Drill through allows you to double click into a cell, open up a new sheet, and it shows you the exact line items from whatever your source system may be. So like I said, like an ERP or a flat file, it'll show you the breakdown of each line item that comprises of this aggregate value you see here. So by clicking on this cell, it'll open up a tab that's something like this, which will show you the actual line items that make up this value. So you see here, we have multiple different POs that will add up to your 14,000 value. And those are all visible without actually leaving the Excel interface. So rather than having to go back to your source and trying to tick and tie values, you're able to see that directly within Excel. So moving back to the input form, leaving actuals aside, you have the ability to select from the drop downs up here all of your sparse dimensionality. So you have the ability to change between different company codes or entities, different cost centers, and different products and projects. You also have the ability to change your scenario inversion depending on which part of the planning cycle you're currently looking at. So now just to talk about the line items and how these work, the line items down below, like from row 8 down, are going to represent your forecasted or planned values. So to initiate the planning process, the first step is selecting a GL account from the smart list listed in the first column here. So in this case, all the input forms are broken out by functional area. So we have input forms for the discovery function, for R&D, for facilities, and only the relevant dimensionality is going to be visible and accessible on each form. So for example, this smart list here, or this dropdown in cell C11, is going to populate all the relevant GL accounts that are associated with this functional area. These are all predefined on the back end, so the dropdown is pre-configured and different GL accounts can be added or removed fairly easily by your system administrator. So first step of the planning process, select a GL account. If I wanted to plan against this travel GL account, I just select it like so. And then I can put in any of my free-form text descriptors in the columns to the right. So these columns can be fully customized. They're just text so that you can describe the intersection that you're planning against. So in this case, like test travel expenses, no vendor, no purchase order. This just allows you to enter as much text as you want so that you can describe your intersection. And if I wanted to add more, it's same idea, just selecting from the dropdown and then describing my activity that I'm planning against. And then I can just input any forecasted data that is necessary for the planning process. So just putting in dummy values here. Now, once I'm ready to submit, I just click submit data. And when that happens, a couple processes are going to be kicked off in the back end. Like I said before, any data that is input and submitted on a form in the SD INP cube, which is what we're looking at here, will automatically be pushed to the SD RPT cube or the SD reporting cube when you click submit data. Once I click submit data, we can see that that data is saved on the form and it consequently pushed to the reporting cube. So just to demonstrate what that actually looks like in the reporting environment, if I flip over here, this is a form that is pointed to the SD RPT cube. This is pretty much just an expense review form. You'll see all your actual and forecasted data on the same form that's grouped by cost center, product, project, and GL account. So if I have actuals for a current intersection, I'll see my actuals, and then below that, I'll see any of my granular or supporting detail line item expenses that were pushed from the INP cube to here in the RPT cube. So if I refresh and look for my intersection that I just planned against, it should populate somewhere on this form. So here I have these two expenses that I planned for. I have that travel expense and those office expenses. So you see all my detail pushed over, my no purchase order, no vendor, and those values I put in for my forecasted months. So here in the actual values, you see your actual months, again, marked with drill through. So you're able to drill from multiple places. And you also have those planned expenses that are pushed from the other cube. So that about wraps things up for this walkthrough. I appreciate your time and I hope this was helpful. Thanks.